Whatever came out of our hospital's abandoned pediatric wing should have stayed there. I guess I should clarify a few things. I work in the OR with my mum at a small Catholic-owned hospital in Utah. We've been bought out by several companies several times, and every single time we are bought out, the company who buys our hospital goes bankrupt. The first few times it was kind of funny. After our last company, though, we've gotten tired of all the lawsuit junk mail showing up for different lawyers trying to get us the money we deserved. Whatever. I'm still paid hourly, and so is everyone else. They can take it up with the docs. God knows they were pissed. That's not necessarily the weirdest part about my job. I guess putting the pieces together, it might correlate with what's been happening in PEDS. It's like a cursed hospital temporarily tamed by the Catholic organization which it belongs to. Regardless, I've always loved my job. I'm a CNA or an orderly, cleaning and moving beds around, filling up fluid warmers, taking out garbage and sharps and instrument pans, turning over rooms. I'm the OR everything person. This all started when we got the stupid O-arm X-ray device. Radiology couldn't hold on to it because it was so massive, and our managers told us that we couldn't move it around, otherwise we could break it. The damn thing cost $1.3 million, and none of us wanted to risk being the one to break it. So naturally, we put it in our biggest operating room, OR5. Unfortunately, this posed another problem for us. We had nowhere to put the Jackson table, our main operating table for complex spine surgeries. On top of that, we had nowhere to put anything. You see, the O-arm was so large that it practically pushed everything in the back of OR5 out the door. When we confronted our managers about our situation, they gave us the simple answer of, just store them in PEDS for now. PEDS is short for the pediatric wing, located within our abandoned COVID-19 isolation wing. It's a long ways away from the OR, and as a 4-foot, 11-inch, 19-year-old girl, I wasn't going to move thousands of pounds worth of equipment all the way down there on my own. So they paired me with a nurse who was floating around the OR at the time and known for being the muscle of our department. We'll call him Mac. That day, I was already exhausted and sleep-deprived, and it was barely 7 in the morning when our managers sent us to do the task. Mac was grumpy, as he typically is in the morning, and always with me, so I suggested we grab a coffee at the hospital coffee place to get amped up. He huffed at me and reluctantly agreed. Mac and I don't exactly have the greatest relationship. Before I started dating my current boyfriend, I was a bit of a papa chaser. Mac is divorced with 2 children, and we spent a lot of time talking. He became like my therapist. And then I fell in love with him. Of course, that freaked him out because 1, my mum is his best friend, and 2, he's 23 years older than me. And while Mac was a bit of a womanizer, cradle snatching wasn't really his style. So, he told my mum, cue the 4 months of awkward silence and bitter small talk. I wasn't bitter, but he expected me to be, so he became hostile back. Every time I asked for help, it was met with attitude. Every time I asked, period, it was met with sarcasm. Mac went from someone I absolutely loved to someone I hated. Then he went from someone I hated to someone I feared with my life. As we sipped down on our coffee, he remarked, "That's not even real coffee. You drink straight sugar? You know how many calories that is?" I could care less about how many calories is in it, old man. It's couldn't care less. You couldn't care less. Why are you so mean to me? I'm correcting you. Can I not do that? Correct this, I say, flipping him off. I'll break that damn finger off. Quit that, he says sternly, and I close up. And I'm not mean to you. You know why things are like this now. I roll my eyes. I'm dating Jackie. Get over yourself. I take another sip of my coffee. Sure, but you were still making moves on me. Mary, have you not once considered taking responsibility for that? You could have gotten me in a world of trouble, and I still haven't gotten a direct apology for it. It's not like this is just magically over because you moved on." He looks down at me, and I feel my face get hot with embarrassment. "I'm bad at apologies." "Yeah, but you didn't." "You ran to my mommy like a little bitch," I say, my embarrassment swallowing me whole. I know Mac wants to bark back at me, but he holds his composure as we're still in our baby blue scrubs and there are patients around us. "We can talk about this another time, and do not call me a bitch. You have no idea how much stress you caused me." He tosses his empty cup of black roast coffee into the trash and stands up off the lobby chair. He turns around and begins to walk back to the OR, and I cuss and mutter at him under my breath as I chase behind him like a duckling. My close friends at work were all at breakfast, so it really was go time before all the surgery cases started to get everything hauled down to PEDS. Mac and I started with the 7D spine camera, a Hulk-sized machine we use once in a blue moon, and pushed the beastly device down through isolation and into PEDS, where Mac badged the two of us in. "Hey, this badge reader is before my time. I'm going to need to borrow yours," I said to Mac as he parked the 7D machine into the first room we found. There was a small baby cradle inside, splattered with a black substance, and we parked the 7D next to it and plugged it in. The black substance seemed to be dripping from the ceiling, and it smelled strongly like cleaning chemicals in the room. We look at it for a second in disgust, and then to each other. "Gross! We should have them put a work order in. See that?" Mac says, handing me his badge and, looking up at the ceiling, almond eyes wide like quarters. "Yeah, maybe find a place further down in PEDS to park the 7D while I go grab the Jackson table. Can do it on my own, I just need help with some of the tele stuff," I replied to Mac. "Okay, sounds fine," Mac says, unplugging the 7D and beginning to pull the machine away from the wall. "Fuck, this place gives me the heebie-jeebies." I nod in agreement and back out of the room, my chest beginning to feel uneasy. The dark rooms of the pediatric wing occasionally flickering to light. The dingy, mildewy smell. I've seen things, all sorts of things in the OR, but nothing made me feel quite like I wanted to vomit like this place did. Right before I scanned my badge to open the exit door of PEDS, I could have sworn I heard 3 distinctly different voices. I stopped in front of the door and hushed my breath to listen. That's when I made them out. A female toddler saying, "Mommy, I want water." Component placement. A baby fussing into a panicked cry, and a young boy repeating, "You're not my dad, you're not my dad, you're not my dad." I turned around, only to see Mac's faded silhouette pulling the 7D with ease down the distant and dusty hallway of PEDS. I heard his familiar smoker coughing a few yards away, which filled me with relief. I hated the guy, but he was a familiar in a place where I felt what I can only describe as absolute terror. The lock clicked, and the doors slowly opened when I badged out, letting me out into the safety of the rest of the hospital. The isolation wing was abandoned, but not nearly as unsettling as PEDS. I hurried back to the OR with Mac's badge to retrieve the Jackson table when I ran into my co-worker Diane. "Hey, are you still on breakfast?" I asked her. "No, what's up?" "I just need help moving the Jackson table back into PEDS. It's big, and I told Mac I could do it myself, but honestly, it's kind of a pain in the ass to do alone." Diane agreed to help me, and we entered OR5, putting on our masks as our peers had already begun to open the sterile supplies. "We're a bit behind, sorry," I say, as we pull the table out, and the tech in the room just laughs and brushes us off. We moved the table out of the OR and begin to move it through the hallway. That's when I started to smell the burning. I quickly asked Diane if she smelled burning as we badged into isolation, and she replied no, then asked me if I was smelling burnt toast. I said no, it smelled like when you burn bacon. We stopped for a second and smelled around, then came to the conclusion that her nose was probably stuffy and that I was probably smelling something from the hospital cafeteria. And they double the price of our lunch for what? Just to burn the damn food? Please, Diane says when we arrive to Peds. Right? Figures. Hey, I have to use Mac's badge. That's how long it's been since we've even used this shitty place. Funny how that is. We're still 8 million in the hole, yet can afford to have millions of dollars of equipment never get used and sit collecting dust in this abandoned wing. And how we can even afford to have an entire abandoned wing to begin with, Diane says as I press Mac badge to the scanner. It doesn't recognize it. I scan it again. Nothing. Huh, I swear it worked when we badged in the first time, I say. Let me try, I've been here for 5 years, Diane says, putting her badge up to the scanner. Doesn't take. Shit. Well, we're gonna have to ask the bosses for one of their badges, I say. Well, I kinda have to start setting up my room. I think Matt can help you cause he's already in there, but good luck, says Diane, and I wave her off back to the OR. I whip out my phone and think about taking a video of the wing to send to my boyfriend, who loves weird, abandoned liminal spaces, when I hear a loud and aggressive pounding on the double doors to Peds. Inside is completely dark from where I'm standing, but the pounding startles me to the point where I physically can't approach the doors to peer inside. When the pounding stops, I exit my frozen state and slowly creep towards the door. Mac, are you in there? I ask. Then the knocking resumes, harder and faster than ever, as if it could break the door down. So hard that I bolt out of isolation and back to the OR as quickly as I can to get my boss. When I get there, trembling and in a sweat, I gently knock on my boss's door, and she opens it. She sees me trembling in the legs, and I quickly explain my situation to her. Mac, I think, is stuck in Peds. He gave me his badge so I could get back in, but I can't. I need you to help me. I need the right badge, I say, in a panic. Here, take my badge. I'm sure you can open it with this one, she says, handing me hers, and I look at her blankly. So go then? What are you waiting for? I couldn't explain to her the feeling I felt when I was there. It was goddamn awful, is what it was. But I had to go back, if not to do my job, for Mac. So I swallowed my fear and went back to isolation, and stood at the door in front of Peds. I was just being a baby, I thought to myself. I'm sure Mac is fine. But when I got back, the pounding had stopped, and one light was on inside. Then the rest flickered on. I figured Mac had found his way around and was fine, so I badged in the door, and it unlocked just fine. Mac, hey, I need some help out here. Mac, I said, immediately making my presence known like a white girl in a horror movie. I didn't see or hear him, but smelled oxidized blood. Pretty typical for the OR, but not Peds. It made my stomach more nauseous than before. I looked around in a few rooms for Mac. Nothing. I kept searching empty room after empty room, becoming more and more paranoid as I searched for Mac before exiting the final room of Peds and running face first into him like a brick wall as I turned around. I shrieked as loud as I could as I looked up at him, and he stared at me blankly in return. Oh my God! Oh my God, Mac, you gave me a fucking heart attack, I say, genuinely afraid and genuinely angry. I punch him, and he doesn't reach to defend himself, just lets me hit him. My punch lands on his arm like hitting a sack of potatoes. Feels wrong and uncomfortable, but I brushed it off as just me being paranoid and also feeling guilty for hitting him. Mac continues to look at me without saying a word. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. About flirting with you. About everything with my mum, about hitting you. Can we just go back to normal? Can we just go back to being friends? I asked him, desperately, and so spooked out of my mind I'm in tears. Mac continues to look at me and then smiles. You are my friend? He wheezes. We can go back to normal? It's like he's choking out the words, but he doesn't cough his typical smoker's cough, and his smile is too big for his firm Korean complexion. His eyes pierce my soul. It's uncomfortable to look into them for too long. Ha! Okay, sorry I'm such a weenie, I said, as wrapped my arms around him. Weenie? He repeats back to me in a clearer tone. He sounds more like himself. Hey, don't call me a weenie. I laugh and he looks at me. Ha 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 ha. He repeats to me. My face drops. Okay, stop that, you're freaking me out, I say. Okay, he says, and stops smiling. I look at him for a second longer with unease, but I figure he's just being weird. The smell of oxidized blood follows us all the way out the door until we get fresh air and move the Jackson table back into one of the other rooms. The feeling of the pediatric wing doesn't bother me much anymore now that I'm with him, until I get close to the closed door where Mac put the 7D. When I go to put something in there, Mac grabs my arm and pulls me away without a word. I didn't want to upset him, as we were finally back on good terms, so I never protested. But something inside me wanted to see what was on the other side of the door. When we were on our last run back to Peds, dropping off things we don't use much like the Sonopet, tried to get to the door when Mac wasn't looking. I pulled the Sonopet close to the door with the 7D and reached for the handle when Mac grabbed me by the back of the neck. I'm sorry, okay, he said to me. I looked at him, wide-eyed and completely frozen in fear. The smell of oxidized blood returned as I made an uncomfortable eye contact with him. He turned me around, forcefully. Back to normal, he said, and pulled me by the hair out of Peds. Over the course of the next few days, Mac didn't say much. In the break room, he would sit and listen. Observe political discourse between our co-workers about the current state of the world until he had something to say in return. Diane and Jekka would talk to him about the gym and he would listen and nod. He stopped smiling weird and began to laugh the way he used to laugh over time. His annoying Roadrunner laugh was completely and all the way there, so I figured he had to have been in a slump when we went into Peds that day. When Eddie asked him about his bass, he boasted about how expensive it was and how it was a limited edition, telling him all about the frets and how he needs a new G string. He was so convincing too, until someone found the body. On a day we had Dr. K in the OR, our main spine surgeon, Laurie came to me and a few others in a panic. She rounded us up and brought us over to Peds in a hush. When we asked what all the fuss was about, she looked all around us and lowered her voice to a whisper. We needed imaging for the spine, so I went to look for the 7D because we haven't used it, and it would have come in handy for these fractures in the lower vertebrae. Laurie's voice began to waver. I watched her open the door to find Mac's corpse lying on the floor next to the 7D machine in the room. The body was weeks old, bloated, scrubs torn, and the face. Mac's face was charred off, as if it had been pressed against a gas stove until his skin caved to the burns. The corpse was unrecognizable except for one minute detail that instantly signaled to me that it was Mac. The tattoo barely exposed on his side under his armpit. It was a tattoo of a sparrow. I'm the only person in our department who knows the tattoo because I used to stalk his Instagram, and he has a photo of himself shirtless flexing in the mirror where you can clearly see the tattoo of the frail bird. In the frenzy of my co-workers gathering around and attempting to figure out who the charred and mangled corpse could be, I ran as fast as I could back to the OR, back to the break room where that thing wearing Mac's skin was lazily lounging around and scrolling through his phone, learning God knows what. If it was really Mac, he would remember the tussle we had. "Hey, Mac," I said to it, and it looked up from his phone and smiled. "Mary, how you doing?" It replicated Mac's cheerful demeanor to the rhythm of which he would speak. "Can we go out to your car for a little? Have a little smoke break?" "Of course." It stood up from the couch and walked out with me. "I didn't know you smoked. Is that recent?" It asked me, and I tried to act casual. I won a film festival in high school for best acting. I'd better be convincing enough to get it to stay calm. "No, actually, been doing it a while." I lied through my teeth. Then the intercom activated, and the woman over the intercom spoke. "Code Yellow, Pediatric Wing. Code Yellow, Pediatric Wing." I saw Mac's face drop slightly. "Hey, you remember what Code Yellow was?" it asks me. I look at it. I stop for a second and look at my badge holder, which has all the codes on the back because mine was new. Code Yellow? Oh, it says hazardous material. Must have been that black stuff dripping from the ceiling when we dropped off the 7D. I say to it. "Yeah, that's probably it." Weird though. It says to me. Thank God. It bought my lie. I get to Mac's car and we stand outside. It reaches into its pocket and pulls out a cigarette, offering me one. "Light me up," I say to it. We stand out there and smoke for a little while. "Mac, I've been meaning to ask, how do you feel about me? I thought we had something. Why did you go and tell my mum? We could have been great." "Mary, because I'm too old for you. I adore you, but it's a matter of maturity and whatnot. You understand? You're gorgeous and I'd absolutely do it if it weren't for the backlash." It takes another drag at the cigarette as police sirens approach the building. I knew it. I knew it wasn't Mac. The first thing Mac always says every time I bring up the subject is that he and my mom are best friends. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Hey, if it's too much to ask, can I maybe see your back muscles one more time? I just think they're so hot and I say, beginning to pick at my skin. Mac laughs and leans against his car, flicking the butt of his cigarette away. He folds his arms and grins that uncanny grin again, for the first time in weeks. "Code Brown is hazardous material," he says to me. My heart drops to the pit of my stomach. He watches my eyes widen. He doesn't move or lunge at me as I'm frozen in fear. So as soon as I feel like I can, I run. I run back towards the building, back to where I'm safe. He doesn't come after me, but his eyes follow me into the hospital until I can no longer see him through the windows. A few weeks later, the police successfully identified the body as Mac's. They asked us a few questions and attempted to track down the imposter. Said imposter never showed back up after my encounter with him at his car. His children were handed over to their mother, and the emptiness of the OR without Mac began to set in. I felt horrible, miserable. I never got to tie up those loose ends with him because I was a coward and because I was stubborn. I gave that thing my apologies. My boyfriend Jackie was preparing for his trip to Japan, so I would have some time to think about the events that transpired over the next 3 weeks on my own. I still lived with my dad, so maybe it would be a good thing to get us talking again and not feeling like two strangers in the same home. My brother has had to keep me company because of the recurring nightmares I have every night, which I'm grateful for. But ultimately, a 17-year-old teenage boy can only do so much for his older sister before he gets tapped out. A few minutes after my dad and brother left to the gym, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Jackie was standing outside in sweats and a t-shirt. I smiled and gave him a hug, and we didn't even need to exchange words. We just felt it. "I'm gonna miss you in Japan, baby. Ooh, make sure to take this too. You need it for the photos," I said, handing him my little Lego figurine of myself that I send with my friends for all their trips. "I'm going to miss you too, baby," he said, and let go of me. My phone then began to vibrate. It was his sister calling. I declined the call and continued talking to Jackie, who seemed very dry with his responses. I began to get sensitive at his signs of rejection, and he responded, "I adore you. You understand." Jackie's sister called again, and I got frustrated and overwhelmed and pulled myself away from Jackie. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," I said, and ran upstairs to my room and closed the door while Jackie waited patiently outside the front door, letting all the cold air in. "What's going on? Are you okay?" I asked as soon as I picked up the phone. It's Jackie. Oh God, he's dead, Mary. He's dead and I don't know what to do." I locked my bedroom door. Then the pounding began.